Kendric Mosley just wanted a quiet afternoon by the pool, but when two officers showed up questioning his right to be there, a silent neighbor hit record. And nothing in their community would be the same again. Sunday afternoons meant something to Kendric Mosley, not because they were quiet or relaxing or even predictable, but because they were his. That small sliver of time after the rush of deadlines and before the work week hit again was sacred. It was when he could breathe, think, just exist. He slipped on his flip-flops, grabbed his stainless steel thermos filled with iced hibiscus tea, tucked his dog-eared copy of The Spook Who Sat by the Door under his arm, and walked the short path from his townhouse to the pool. The air in Marietta, Georgia, had that late summer thickness, but the breeze made it tolerable. Kendric loved the walk, past trimmed hedges, past the same tired no loud music sign, past the patch of lawn where the neighborhood kids left their neon water guns. He found a chair near the deep end and settled in. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. He read, he sipped, he adjusted his sunglasses and tried not to think about Monday. Then he noticed the black and white patrol SUV crawling past the gate, slowing down, backing up. Two officers stepped out. They didn't walk with urgency, but with that bored kind of purpose, like they already knew who they were coming for. Kendric's shoulders tensed. He sat up straight, closing his book softly. "Afternoon," the taller one said, hand resting on his belt. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Kendric blinked. "I live here, just enjoying the pool." "Can we see your ID?" the other officer asked. He had pale skin, sharp features, and the kind of face that didn't blink often. Kendric reached into his bag. "Sure, I've got my keycard too. Is there a problem?" "We got a call," said the taller one, Officer Trent Halley. "Someone reported a suspicious individual hanging around the pool area." Kendric handed over his driver's license and community-issued keycard. "Suspicious how?" Halley didn't answer. Instead, he passed the card to his partner, Corporal Bryce Fenwick, who examined it like he'd never seen plastic before. Fenwick looked up. "You said you live here. Which unit?" 412B. Bought it in April. I've got my deed at home if you want to walk over." Fenwick raised an eyebrow. 412B, huh? That's not usually the profile we see for that address. Kendric caught the tone. He'd heard it before. Polite words carrying an accusation like a brick in a box. He exhaled through his nose. "Look, officers, I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm just out here reading. That's it." Halley flipped through a little notepad. "You got any guests? Anyone else supposed to be meeting you here?" "No, just me." There was a pause. One of those long silences where nobody says what they're really thinking. From the second-floor balcony of the building across the courtyard, someone watched. Tessa Brindley leaned slightly against the railing, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. She knew Kendric. They weren't best friends, but they spoke often enough, mostly about their dogs, traffic on Roswell Road, and which Thai place actually delivered on time. She didn't like the way those cops were standing. Too close, too casual with their questioning. Fenwick handed the key card back, slowly. "All right, just doing our job." But he didn't leave. He looked around like he was still waiting for Kendric to mess up somehow. "You understand, right?" Halley added. "It's not about you. We just have to check when we get calls." Kendric stood up. "I understand you're here because someone thought I didn't belong." Nobody answered that. But down the street, another neighbor walked her golden retriever past the pool gate and barely got a glance. Kendric didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice or flex his rights the way some might expect from someone in his shoes. He'd learned long ago that the louder he got, the less people listened. So he stayed measured. Still standing now, he looked Officer Halley square in the eye. "Let me ask something. Did the caller say what I was doing that made them uncomfortable?" Halley scratched at his neck. "They just said there was a man they didn't recognize, sitting by the pool. Looked like he didn't live here. No mention of threats, arguments, any kind of disturbance?" "No." "Then I'm just a guy sitting by the water, reading a book and sipping tea." Corporal Fenwick clicked his pen. "Sir, we don't make the calls. We just respond. And right now, we're responding." Kendric kept his hands visible, his voice steady. I understand. But what I'm saying is that I've lived here for months. I've paid my dues like everyone else. If someone can call the cops on me for that, then what exactly am I allowed to do? The air between them grew tight. Fenwick took a step closer. You don't need to get defensive. Kendric didn't move. I'm not being defensive. I'm being real. All right, sir. Hallie interrupted. Let's not escalate things. Can you confirm for us again? Do you live alone? Anyone else in the residence? Kendric exhaled slowly. I live with my sister. She works nights, won't be home until this evening. No guests, no noise, nothing illegal. Just trying to enjoy the place I pay for. Fenwick wrote something in his notepad. Didn't say what. Then he circled back. Can you take us to the unit? Kendric blinked. Right now, if you don't mind. He did mind. But he also knew what might happen if he said no. From her balcony, Tessa pressed record. She couldn't hear everything, but she saw Kendric's body language. Calm, still, but clearly tired of this back and forth. She zoomed in slightly. One of the officers was standing far too close, invading his space in that slow, deliberate way that felt more about dominance than safety. Mom? Her teenage daughter called from inside. Hang on, Tessa said without turning around. I need to film this. Back at the pool, Kendric shook his head. I'm not comfortable letting you into my home when I haven't done anything wrong. That landed like a challenge. Fenwick squinted. Then how do we know you really live there? Kendric pointed to his ID. Because my name matches the address. Because I showed you my pool access card. And because I know how many damn parking spaces come with the unit. Hallie shifted his weight. Look, you seem like a reasonable guy. Let's just be clear. We're trying to verify your presence. That's it. No one's accusing you of anything. But you are, Kendric said. You just won't say it outright. That stung. Hallie's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Then, from across the courtyard, another voice rang out. He lives there. Everyone turned. Tessa, now standing at the edge of her balcony, held up her phone. He lives here. That's Kendric Mosley, Unit 412B. I see him walking his dog every morning at 6:30. He's lived here since April. The two officers hesitated. Ma'am, please stay on your property. Fenwick called up. I am on my property, she snapped back, and I'm filming this because I've seen enough of these videos to know how they end. Kendric glanced up at her and gave the smallest nod of thanks. That moment, the neighbor, the camera, the exposure, it changed the energy. Hallie's tone softened. All right, Mr. Mosley, I think we're good here. Appreciate your cooperation. But Kendric didn't answer. He sat back down in his chair, picked up his book, and stared at the open page without reading a word. The officers stood there for a few more awkward seconds before heading back toward their SUV. As they pulled away, Kendric leaned back and closed his eyes. But his afternoon was already over, and as the sun pressed on, so did the questions burning at the edge of his patience. Tessa Brindley stayed at her balcony rail longer than she meant to. She watched the patrol SUV drive slowly toward the exit gate, then paused, watching the officers speak through the cracked window before finally rolling out of sight. It took a minute before the sound of tires over the gravel faded entirely. Only then did she lower her phone. Inside, her daughter, Mira, peeked around the doorway. Why were you filming them? Tessa turned, still holding her phone like it was fragile. Because things like that don't always end well. And if something had happened, I wasn't going to be the neighbor who just didn't see anything. Mira frowned. But nothing happened, right? Tessa paused. That doesn't mean it was okay. Down by the pool, Kendric sat still. No phone, no music. Just him and the book he was no longer reading. From up high, he looked small in the sun's glare, like a man forced to perform calmness just to keep the peace. She'd seen him plenty of times, walking that goofy pit mix he had, grabbing his mail in slippers, sometimes chatting with Mr. Fry from the end unit about lawn fertilizer like two retirees. The man had a routine. He fit in. But today he'd been marked. Tessa scrolled back through the video she'd taken. There wasn't much sound, but the visual told enough. Kendric standing stiff, arms controlled. The two officers hovering close, one writing, the other crowding him. The kind of scene that didn't need volume to explain itself. She tapped save and backed it up to the cloud, just in case. Meanwhile, Kendric was still at the pool, but he wasn't relaxing. He stared at the same sentence in his book for several minutes before finally shutting it and packing up his things. His muscles ached in a strange way, not from exertion, but from holding in too much. He wasn't angry exactly. Not yet. What he felt was more like that slow burn when your dignity is poked too many times in too short a span. Like someone tapping your head again and again until it stops being annoying and becomes a kind of violence. He walked back toward his unit, avoiding eye contact with the couple chatting by the tennis courts. They'd definitely seen the cops. Didn't say a word. Inside, the air conditioning kicked on with a soft click. He set down his bag and went to the kitchen, poured what was left of his iced tea over the sink, and just stood there, quiet. After a moment, he pulled out his phone. 2 messages from his sister, Alina Mosley, asking how the pool was. 1 missed call from a number he didn't recognize, probably the HOA again. He ignored both. Then the knock came. Not a pounding, just 3 taps. Polite but sharp. He checked the peephole. It was Tessa. He hesitated, then opened the door. She didn't wait for him to speak. I recorded everything. I figured you might want it. Kendric blinked, unsure for a second. Seriously? Yeah, she said, handing him her phone. I thought they were pushing too hard. You didn't do anything, and they wouldn't let it go. It didn't sit right. He played the video, watched himself stand there, uncomfortable but composed, watched the officer's body language, watched how close they got. When it ended, he looked up. Thank you. Really? Tessa shrugged. You shouldn't need someone watching you just to be treated like a neighbor. There was a pause between them. Then she added, if you ever need someone to back you up with the HOA or file a report or anything, I'm here. Kendric looked at her, really looked, and gave a slow nod. Appreciate that. He didn't say much else. Not then, but the gesture planted something in him. Something that had been buried under layers of tolerance and resignation. Tessa walked back toward her unit, and Kendric stood at his door for a few extra seconds, holding her phone like it weighed more than it should. But just because the moment passed didn't mean he was ready to let it go. Kendric didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed with his eyes open, arms folded behind his head, listening to the slow tick of the wall clock he hated but hadn't replaced. The house was still. No traffic, no neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, just silence and the echo of the day playing on repeat. He kept seeing Fenwick's face, that slow lean-in, the tone of his voice, the way he'd looked at Kendric like he wasn't a homeowner or a resident or a professional man who designed hospital interfaces for a living, but just some intruder near water. But what bothered Kendric more was that he'd seen it coming. The truth is, the signs had been piling up since he closed on the townhouse. He just didn't want to admit it. Like the email from the HOA a few weeks in. Reminder to all residents, please avoid propping open shared gates for guests. It landed in his inbox the day after he'd held the gate open for a delivery driver and was spotted by Mr. Irwin, who didn't even say hello. Or the way some neighbors pulled their kids a little closer when Kendric walked by with his dog, Bruno. A sweet, clumsy rescue who was more likely to chase butterflies than people. He'd caught one dad subtly recording him on his phone as he waited outside the leasing office for a package. And the garbage bin thing. That one stung. Every Thursday, the HOA sent notices about improperly stored trash cans. After 3 of them, each time when Kendric's bin had been tucked neatly against the wall, he knocked on the office door and asked to see the photo evidence. The manager fumbled through a binder and showed him a grainy picture of someone else's unit. Completely different number. No apology. Just, we'll update the file. It was all small, maybe. Harmless if you looked at it in isolation. But not when it keeps happening. He got up from bed and opened his laptop. The glow stung his eyes, but he didn't care. He started organizing files, sorting screenshots, HOA email, photos of his clean patio after bogus complaints. That text from the landscaping crew who once told him they were asked to double-check his side yard, even though no one else had been questioned. He clicked open a folder labeled Pool Incident, Raw, and transferred Tessa's video to it. Then he created a second folder, Pattern. This wasn't about one afternoon. It hadn't been for a while. At around 2 a.m., Alina came home from her nursing shift. She found her brother at the kitchen table, typing. She dropped her keys in the bowl and rubbed the back of her neck. "You're up late." Kendric didn't look up. Couldn't sleep. She stepped closer and saw the open video on the screen. "Oh," she said softly. "It happened again." He nodded. She leaned on the counter and folded her arms. "This one worse than the trash notices?" He let out a half laugh. "2 officers showed up today. Said I looked suspicious sitting by the pool. Didn't believe I lived here. Pressed me for ID, asked to come into the unit." Alina closed her eyes and muttered, "God." Tessa recorded it. "Good." She brought it over. Alina sat across from him. "So, what now?" Kendric paused. "I don't know. I've got everything documented. But it's like, you stack it all up and still wonder if it's worth pushing back. If you say something, people accuse you of stirring the pot. If you stay quiet, they get to write the story for you." Alina reached across the table and touched his hand. "You already know the answer." Kendric looked at her. "Yeah, I do." But he also knew that telling the truth didn't always guarantee people would listen. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Kendric stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush hanging from one side of his mouth, his eyes locked on his own reflection like he was trying to decide if he even recognized the man looking back. Not because of how he looked, but because of how tired he felt. Not just physically, but somewhere deeper. He showered, dressed, made coffee, went through the motions. But when he reached for his keys and glanced at the pool bag near the door, he stopped. He used to love that walk. That little stretch between his door and the lounge chairs. It was peace. Now it felt like walking through a metal detector, knowing you've got nothing on you, but still bracing for the alarm. He left the bag where it was. Instead, Kendric took Bruno out for a long walk through the back trail near the wooded area that bordered the neighborhood. Less eyes, less pressure. Bruno bounced like usual, sniffing at every tree root, stopping to inspect empty snack wrappers as if they were clues in a mystery. Kendric let him lead, let himself breathe. But as they rounded the corner back toward the community, he noticed something strange. People were looking at him differently. Not all, but enough. Mrs. Carson, who usually waved while watering her porch plants, turned away before their eyes could meet. The couple in Unit 3055, who often smiled when he passed with Bruno, kept their heads down. Word had gotten out. Tessa's video had started making rounds in the HOA's private Facebook group. Someone leaked it to a local advocacy page. By 10 a.m., it had already been shared more than 300 times. Kendric hadn't posted anything himself. He hadn't written a statement or tweeted his story. But the video spoke louder than anything he could have said. When he returned home, he found 2 letters slipped under the door. One was from the HOA. "We are aware of a recent incident involving law enforcement and a resident. Please remember to treat our community members with respect and kindness." It felt hollow, cold. The second envelope had no return address. Inside was a note, written in tight block letters. "Don't bring attention to yourself. We all just want to live in peace." Kendric stared at the paper for a long time before folding it twice and tossing it into the trash. He wasn't surprised. Not anymore. That afternoon he called Tessa. "Hey," she answered quickly. "I figured I might hear from you." "I saw the post," he said. "I didn't expect it to move like that," she sighed. "It wasn't me. I sent it to a friend who works with the community justice group in Decatur. She asked if she could share it anonymously. I said yes. Maybe I should have asked you first." "No," Kendric said. "You did the right thing." There was a pause. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then told the truth. "Not really." She lowered her voice. "You shouldn't have to carry this by yourself." He appreciated that more than he could say. But part of him had learned not to lean too hard on people. Too many times, concern turned to silence the moment things got inconvenient. That evening, Kendric sat on his balcony with Bruno curled at his feet, watching the sky turn from pink to grey. He thought about his father, about the time they were stopped in Fayetteville for matching a description, and how his dad had stood straight, calm, respectful, even though he was scared out of his mind. "You don't get to mess up," he'd told Kendric later. "You mess up, you give them a reason. You give them a reason, they'll write your story without you." Now, decades later, Kendric could still feel the weight of that warning. He didn't want trouble, but trouble always seemed to find him when all he wanted was peace. But maybe this time he had a reason to write the story himself. By the next morning, Kendric had made up his mind. He poured himself a coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop again. The files he had organized 2 nights before were still there, each labeled, time-stamped, catalogued like evidence in a courtroom. He clicked on the folder marked Pattern and stared at the growing list. Screenshots, emails, even a photo he'd snapped 2 months earlier of a handwritten note on his windshield that read, "Keep the volume down. People have jobs." That had been after a Sunday afternoon when he'd played jazz on his Bluetooth speaker for exactly 12 minutes. He opened a new email. Subject: Formal complaint regarding incident on August the 13th, 2025. He didn't write it like someone angry. He wrote it like someone tired of not being believed. He kept it factual. Time, place, officers' names, explained the exchange at the pool, attached a link to the video Tessa had filmed, included the other neighbor, Mr. Fry, who later texted him that he'd heard the whole thing from his patio and would vouch for Kendric if needed. When he finished, he read the whole thing 3 times before hitting send. And when he did, he didn't feel relief. He felt like he'd just lit a match in a room full of paper. A few hours later, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Then another call came, this one from a contact he recognized. Tasha Murrell, an old college friend who now worked in community advocacy and legal support in DeKalb County. He picked up. "I saw the video," she said. "Didn't even realize it was you at first. You good?" "I'm all right," Kendric said. "Well, as all right as you can be when someone calls the cops because you dared to relax. You filing a complaint?" "Already did. Want some backup?" Kendric leaned back in his chair. "What kind of backup?" "Well," she said, "we can start with pressure. Media doesn't always listen, but if we get a few more voices around you, things might start moving. Not everyone cares about one guy being harassed, but people care about policy." He hesitated. "I'm not trying to be some kind of headline." "I get that," she said. "But this isn't just about you. You know how many people this happens to who don't have a video? Don't have a Tessa on the balcony?" He didn't answer. Tasha added, "You already started the fire. Might as well make it count." He agreed to meet her the next day. That evening, he and Alina sat on the patio with takeout containers and quiet music playing from her phone. The air was warm but pleasant. For the first time all day, things felt halfway normal. Alina looked up from her noodles. "You talk to anyone?" "Yeah. Tasha. She wants to help with the complaint." Alina nodded, chewing slowly. "I think that's smart. I don't want to make it bigger than it is." "Too late," she said. "It's already bigger. You didn't make it that way. They did." Kendric sipped his water. "You ever get tired of this conversation?" "Every time," she said. "And yet, here we are." He looked out over the dark courtyard. A few porch lights were on. Somewhere, a dog barked faintly. He wondered if those same neighbors who watched silently yesterday would speak up if they had to. He wasn't counting on it. The next morning, Tessa stopped him near the mailbox. "I got a letter," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "HOA. Warning me about inappropriate conduct and unauthorized video sharing." Kendric blinked. "You serious?" "Yep. It's dressed up nice, but that's what it says." "Did you do anything unauthorized?" "Nope," she said. "I filmed from my own balcony, didn't break any rule. But you know how this works. They want people quiet." He stared at the letter in her hands, the thin veil of professionalism trying to cover a message that was crystal clear. "Sit down. Don't make waves." "You gonna fight it?" he asked. "Already did,"